No.
So we got, Kylie has to give her academic data report, and then we have Chris, the auditor, who will go before Chris and gives her CFO report,
Okay.
so. Hi, Kylie.
Well, hi again.
Is this your first board meeting this year?
This is 3 in a row. Mary Ann's
Oh.
making me my own nameplate for next time.
Oh,
Just as
boy.
fair warning.
All right, so
We're allowed
Kylie's
to say
academic
special
data is on
guest.
10, is that right?
I don't know.
Board book 10?
Sorry.
Whatever you say. Yes, 10.
Kylie, do you want the board to see your memo first, or go right into your charts?
I think you can go right into the charts.
Okay?
So again, hello everyone. Happy to be here to present academic data to you. The first document that you're going to see in your packet and board book details the SAT scores as the performance indicator. And while there isn't a current board goal associated with SAT, I know that that's something that's coming. And since it is the measure of assessment that is reported on the school report card, I wanted to touch on this first because this is really how the state of Illinois, one of the measures that the state of Illinois uses to determine how well our school is doing. So what you can see first in the first chart is a breakdown of average SAT composite and section scores. So broken down the composite on a range of 4 to 1600, and then broken down ERW and math. I have our previous 2 classes of data there to the right of the blue highlighted column. The first class that took the SAT for us when that data started appearing on the school report card was 2018. So I wanted to include all of the years that we've administered that test at the junior level. While SAT doesn't provide a composite benchmark, in theory what you can do is look at the idea of the 480 and the 530 being college ready, add those together, and then you can look at what college readiness in both of the subject tests translates to in terms of a composite score. So when you see under the additional information, there's just some detailed explanation in terms of what College Board considers college ready. So students who are meeting or exceeding that benchmark have a 75% chance of earning at least a C or better in a college-bound course that's connected to that subject test. So that's kind of the benchmark, what we're talking about when College Board's considering someone college ready. When you look at the bottom there, the way that SAT reports its data is to report not only on average scores for the composites and for the subject test, but also to look at what percentage of our student population met benchmarks, met either the math benchmark or the reading benchmark, or met both of those, and then they also publish the number of students who met neither one of those benchmarks. So where you look at the highlighted column, you can see the class of 2020, so we're talking about our current senior class. And what makes me excited and very proud of our teachers and our students and our efforts toward the SAT is being able to see that class of 2020, we're talking about increases in all areas, except for the one decrease, which is the decrease we want to see, which is the number of students who are meeting neither benchmark for SAT. So we've put a lot of energy into what goes into that score, talking about giving practice tests at the sophomore level, giving the full SAT suite when students come to register for Riverside Brookfield High School. We give them a placement exam that is the PSAT 8-9. The students took that last Saturday. So we are using a full suite of assessments to be able to track student progress as they come in, and then at the 9th grade level, the 10th grade level, and the 11th grade level, so we can know where we want to put our resources, know what students need to go into our CAP class for a little bit of extra support. When you take a look at some of the plans that we have to increase our performance on the SAT, the Leadership Council and I, which is our building administration and our instructional coaches, have talked all of first quarter about a very conscious, purposeful, intentional SAT focus across the board in all of our classes in terms of what we are doing in our fine arts classes and our world language classes. How are those skills translating to supporting our students being college ready? I had a long talk today with Patricia Reeves talking about, when she first heard from her instructional coach, okay, we're going to put this SAT focus in second quarter, she thought, okay, as the German teacher, what am I doing here? And we talked about the fact that everything she does in German is leading them right to that evidence-based reading and writing test. Because they are conjugating verbs, they are working with punctuation, they are learning language and how to express themselves. It might be a different language, but the principles are very similar and translatable. So that's something that we've been talking about, really pushing purposeful, meaningful, intentional support in to all of those classes. I will say this again, and I've said it before, the SAT feels so different than the ACT. When I taught test prep as a teacher and ACT was the focus, I was teaching kids how to beat a test. 100%. I was teaching them how to beat a test. I wasn't working on their skills because that's the kind of test that the ACT was. And with the SAT being our high stakes assessment, it much more closely aligns to curricularly what we do in a school, what is good instruction and what students really need to learn and know to be successful when they leave. So SAT is really about looking at your whole curriculum and looking about what everything a student does during the course of a day and how that builds their skill level up, rather than me telling a student, just read the first parts of the answers, because if you just look at the performance verb, you can figure out they're trying to trick you. So it's a much more curricularly based assessment. There were a couple of questions about some of the plans that we have to increase our performance. One was about how do we provide staff members with embedded time to take a sample SAT test or to talk to their colleagues about what are you doing in your class that I might be able to make work in my class. We have our PLC time, and that's certainly something that we use for that reason. Institute days, since I got here, we've really tried to intentionally carve out some department time at Institute days for a little bit more than that 40 minutes. 35, 40 minutes is, once you get started on something and you're kind of screeching to a halt. So we try to build in some embedded time in Institute days as well. Last year we did things a little bit differently, and I sat down with Lindsay Minot, the instructional coach of the math department. I said, we really need to make some gains in math, and we need to take a look at our math curriculum across the board, and we need to see vertically how we align and where we could really hit some topics earlier that we might need to hit earlier, or just kind of see it all in front of us. And so we subbed the whole math department out last year, and they spent an entire day in front of a whiteboard and with all of their materials, and collaboratively they mapped out, when I walked into the room, it was on all of the whiteboards in the room, they mapped out what they do at every single level so they could see gaps and they could close them, and they could see repetition and they could figure out if that was necessary repetition or accidental. And if you look at what happened with our math scores, there was an increase there. And so what we're seeing is very intentional vertical alignment and planning and collaborative conversations between colleagues about what we're doing in our classrooms really does support our students' skill development and their progression toward mastery of a particular skill. I will never think we have enough embedded time, and the educators on the board will probably understand and agree with that. So we have talked as a leadership team about, how do we carve out more time to really make sure that we are having those critical conversations as colleagues and that we're pushing one another to push our students. We've talked about the possibility, do we need our Thursday late starts to be a little later so that we can extend our PLC time? I have done some research into what we need to do to pull off school improvement days that are allowed under ISB to give our teachers some opportunity to do that work. I came from a school district who had a school improvement plan because our scores weren't where we wanted them to be. So we were mandated school improvement days, but we still have the option to do that as a very successful school as well. It's not something that's reserved for struggling schools. So we're continuing to look at how we carve out more time. And for me, after seeing the collaboration in the math department under Lindsay's leadership and really what that translated to in actionable steps in the classroom and how that translated to student success, that's the proof for me, again, that collaboration between colleagues and really talking through what's best practice and how to advance student skill, that's where our success really lies in that area.
Kylie, you had a question submitted about,
Yep.
do you want to present that real quick?
So I made a copy for all of you There was a question submitted about trying to correlate SAT score with class rank. And so I made a quick table last night to try to take a look at this. So that's what you have in front of you is the answer to that question. What you will see, we had 419 students in the senior class who are ranked. And so I had Sherry pull a Skyward report for me that gave me a list of all the seniors and their class rank as right next to their SAT score. So what I did was I took the top 10% of our students and I averaged that subgroup's SAT score. And so the average score there is a 1367. Remember, that's on a scale of 1600. So I also wanted to give you a little bit of extra context so that you can see what the top and the bottom is, right? So our top 10% of our students, which is around 42 students, their lowest composite score is 1240, and the student in our school who scored the highest on their SAT got a 1530 out of 1600. So then I just went down and broke it out, the next 10% of students, what was their average at 1240, what was their range. The really interesting thing on this is if you look at the part of the chart where it says 31 to 40% and 41 to 50%, and your immediate reaction might be that those two numbers are flipped because the composite average for that 31 to 40% of students is 1079 and 41 to 50 is 1091. That isn't inaccurate. It is an accurate score, and I think that alone right there shows you that it's not necessarily your top ranked students who score the highest on their SAT. There's a lot that goes into grades. Grades is kind of a big hot button topic in education in general right now, and I think it's for this reason. Talking about the integrity of grades and what do we mean when we say that a student is receiving an A? What does that mean? What can they do because of that? So that little blip right there in the data shows that a student could be all A's because they are a doer, right? You give me hoops and I'm gonna jump through it. And
I do a lot of extra credit.
I'm gonna do all the things that you want me to do. And then you have some students who don't do school. They're not connected to school. They're not homework doers. They come because they need to come. But then they sit for an SAT test and you see their scores and you go, whoa, hold on a minute. So you have those anomalies that make some of this data not necessarily that reliable in terms of a predictor of SAT success, but it at least gives you an idea of where our students are falling and how they're ranked and where their SAT scores fall within that ranking system.
So quick question. So we have by class 2018, 2019, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have the ability, because they've now taken the full suite of SAT tests, to see their relative growth?
Right, in the cohort, right, follow that cohort all the way up.
Because I guess I'm, instead of taking one class versus another class,
Right.
is how did this class do as 8th graders versus today as seniors?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a different way to look at it? Am I?
No, it's
Yeah.
certainly, yes.
Yeah.
There may be some, and I'm pretty sure that is something that it just might take us a little bit to get into that, and I'm hoping that that's something. It's no secret, and Dr. Skinkis knows this, Ramona knows this too. When we look at the SAT goal in the future, I am hoping with all hope that we are looking at a growth goal, right? That we are looking at what are we able to do with our students from the time that they get into our door till the time that they leave us, from 9th grade to 11th grade. What is that? What does that picture look like? So that is certainly something that as the board develops an SAT goal, absolutely, I think it's part of our due diligence to look at it in that vein, absolutely.
Okay, if you pull that together, then I could just send it out in a future Friday update.
You don't want me to come back?
Let's have
You know what, December you can come back. You want to-
Oh, okay, yeah,
Around the
let's do
holiday
it.
season.
Let's do it, I'll bring gifts.
This is what I deal with. On TV, thank you.
As you're talking, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. So when we're looking at SAT, and we're looking at benchmark, this is minimum threshold, correct?
This is considered college readiness, yes.
But college readiness means a 75% chance of getting a
Yes.
C. So my concern is, if 100% of our students met benchmark, that would just mean that they have a 75% chance of getting a C. Doesn't mean we're excellent, nor does it give us any indication that we're excellent or at what level of excellent we're at. Like the National Merit Scholars we had or the honorees that just came, they achieved this goal that very few students, in the United States can achieve. My concern is that we present these numbers and, they're passing, everybody's passing. If everybody's gonna go to college and just get a C,
Sure.
that's not, I don't think that's our goal.
We only have 55% of our students meeting both benchmarks. So we're not even at everybody passing yet.
So what do we have anything from this test that also gives us insight into excellence, not just minimum threshold, but into, we have a large cohort that go to Champaign, and they have to have certain scores and meet certain benchmarks. We had students matriculate into some prestigious schools. What do we have that would give us any indication that if you come to RB and you do well here, that you could matriculate into some of these schools you might like to go to?
In terms of the SAT, there isn't something that said, short of, the higher you get, because if you're looking at that sheet that I gave you, you're talking about just that college readiness benchmarks being 10-10, right? And we know that this test is out of 1,600. Short of knowing that the higher you get toward that 1,600, the more rare your score is, because you are, getting up into the 80th percentile, the 85th percentile, the 90th percentile. There's not anything that College Board presents that says beyond that benchmark, like here is another mark that might accelerate you into college. A lot of districts are going now to talking about the profile of a graduate in terms of, what does a successful graduate from X school look like? In my CADCA group, there's lots of emails flying back and forth about schools that are starting to put together a profile of a graduate. I think that's something that we can look at in terms of what do we consider to be that success marker that we could put forth. College Board just isn't going to do that for us. I do think that as we start looking at the vast college and career readiness indicators that ISB is going to begin holding us accountable for, freshmen on track, things of that nature, I think we're going to get closer to that because there will be different benchmarks that are considered college and career ready. So it won't just be the test. It will be meeting benchmark on the test and successfully completing a career exploration activity and completing an internship activity. Certain different monikers that are going to go on the school report card with regard to career and college readiness indicators. But like I said, we might have to figure out how we want to package that and present it so that we can showcase those successes of our students.
Kylie, you want to go into your other?
So the third page of that report is
AP?
Caught everything. Yes, is the AP students with passing scores. So our district goal is that 100% of our AP students score have at least one score that is a 3 or higher. Class of 2019, we were sitting at 72.4% of our AP students were getting a 3 or higher in at least one test. This is always a tricky measure for me to report on because what I know to be true is that RB is an open access school, right? So we do not have barriers for students to take AP courses. There are schools that have barriers for students to take AP courses because if you let just anybody in, then you don't necessarily know what your average pass rate is going to be. We are a school that since I arrived here, continuously we are reaching out to students to say, challenge yourself, stretch yourself, see what the experience is like. The experience is more valuable than the test score, which is what College Board would say. That's their message with AP. They are an open access entity. So what that does, though, is the more and more and more students that we enlist to take an AP course, the more likely it is that some of them are stretching. I have students that are sitting in AP statistics right now, so an AP level math at the senior level, who started out in extended algebra. That, to me, the fact that you came from extended algebra where you were struggling, you were in an intervention, and now you're sitting in an AP statistics class in your senior year, that is a victory in and of itself, regardless of what you get on that AP test. So we're acting for and against each other in a way, because we're putting more students in for the experience, and that has the ability to potentially impact how many of our students are passing those classes. So I put some numbers in there just so you could see. We had 27 more students, 144 more exams taken. So we're talking about pretty significant increases year over year. We break this data down. If you look at that second chart, we break this data down by department. We do not do it by subject test or content test, and that has been a question in the past. The reason that we break it down by department and content specific is because in some cases, for example, there is one teacher, one class that might be taking an AP test. So for example, Juan Tinoco teaches AP Spanish literature, and he's the only person that does it. So if I sat up here and I said, AP Spanish literature has X number of pass rate, now I'm putting Juan's teaching data and the data of maybe 22 of his students on TV and announcing it publicly. And that gets into some sticky situations with students' records and really putting our teachers at the forefront of that kind of vulnerability. So we report by department because we're looking at how all of the courses within a department. So when you look at English, our pass rate, AP Language and AP Lit feed into that pass rate for that very reason. We offer AP tests. This was a question also. We offer AP tests and courses to levels 10 through 12. So our freshmen do not take AP courses. We want to get them into the building. We want to get them acclimated. We want them to understand what a rigorous high school experience looks like before we start throwing AP classes at them. We have had exceptions in the past. Last year, we had a student who was an 8th grader coming over to take math with us because he was double accelerated, who sat for an AP computer science class because he wanted to try it out, never sat for the class, and he got a 5. So, and I think his math teacher's comment to me was, his brain works like a computer. So there are anomalies there, but across the board, our students take AP classes in levels 10 through 12. One thing that's a little concerning that I will say when we talk about our plans to increase AP enrollment and pass rate, I think this comes back to that kind of double-edged sword where I say we're sort of battling ourselves. We want more kids in, but we want the pass rate to be higher too. This year, more than my last few years here, I have signed more drop slips for students who loaded up on the APs and then got into the classes and went, whoa, nope, I'm not doing this work. My most concerning one was a student, and on the form it said they were dropping an AP class, and the reason they listed was class is too difficult, not what I expected, current grade B+. So we are also fighting kind of an internal battle with the fact that we do have students who intend to go into an AP class, maybe for the grade bump, right? Because we have a weighted grading scale. So, that's something that we have to take into consideration. And as much as we want more of our students to take an AP opportunity, we want to make sure that that's right for them as well. Because what's right for our students, in my mind, outweighs getting a certain amount of numbers on a paper to say, this is how many kids took an AP class. Right now, the instructional coaches and I are in the process of creating profiles for each of our courses. And once all of our requests come in for next year, we are going to pull students in and we're going to talk to them about what does an AP experience look like and what can you gain from that experience and what is that going to demand of you when you go into an AP class and what does it mean for you if you're a senior and 5 of your classes are AP. It means that you're going to be hanging out at home doing homework most nights, right? And you're going to be preparing for a test. What we want to try to avoid is students overloading themselves with APs and then getting so frustrated and so bogged down that they drop and take a study hall. Because now you're not getting any skills. Maybe if you took psychology instead of AP psychology, if that was more appropriate for you, you would actually still be in the class learning skills and getting something that's going to move you to the next level. So we're really looking at our AP enrollment very seriously to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to students beyond just getting them in the class, but really letting them and their families know what is that going to look like once you're there.
Kylie,
Mm-hmm.
somebody could get an A in an AP class.
Yes.
And get a 1 on the test.
Correct.
So should we be reporting maybe 2 sets of data? So one of the encouragement is that you take the AP class so that you're prepared to take a college class, and not all students even have to take the AP test. They can still get an A in the class. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll do well in the test.
So are you saying should we present 2 sets of data? Are you talking like test pass data and grade data?
Yeah, maybe, because if we value the AP experience, and we have said we do, and I know from my own children, I value that. They took the test as an exercise, but it didn't matter. What mattered that they took the course.
Yeah, so I don't know if we need to report on their grade data. We got to be careful.
Well, no, but I mean, how many of our students,
Enrollment in AP classes.
or how many are passing the class, not necessarily getting a 5 on the test?
I think it's a correlation of grade in the class to the AP test. right?
Yes,
So I think it's-
because we might have many more students doing fairly well in their AP classes, getting that experience that we said that
Was
we're
important.
supporting, and not as many doing as well on the test.
So what do you think, Kylie? Is there a correlation? A's get 5s and,
No.
B's get 4s?
No.
Is there
Because
no
some people
correlation to
aren't.
that at all?
Same thing with the SAT data.
Yes.
Some people aren't test takers.
Right.
Some people are.
And you know what? Historically, education in a lot of ways has been, I think it's moved away from that, but education has been, to a certain degree, a separation of do and won't do in some instances. And that is why some schools are really moving away from traditional grades, because they want it to be more about what can I do when I get out of here. When I taught AP myself, there was always a differential between, my students could have had A's all through and then sat for the exam and gotten a 2. And that forced me to look at my grades, right? That forced me to look at myself as a teacher and say, what am I telling my kids, right? Am I telling my kids? So I had to be very careful about how I communicate that. And I think our teachers do a good job of that, of helping students understand the difference between what you do in a classroom and the performance that you do on that test. But I don't think there's a strong correlation. I wish there was more of a predictor, right? But, at the end of the day, if you're, we have 2 weeks of AP exams even. So at the end of the day, you're a senior and your exam is the last day in week 2, and you already know in your brain that the school that you've already committed to, because you know where you're going to school by May at that point, you already know that they're not going to give you any credit for that class. So when I go in, what do my bubbles look like? I'm ready to be done. I want to graduate. We can't
this
control
tomorrow.
for those kind of
He
things.
doesn't play a dinosaur.
Right, exactly. I've seen some good pictures, Wes. I really have. I really
Kylie, just to
have.
keep these moving, if there's no other questions that go on to ACT.
So the last indicator is the ACT, and it is still a district goal, and I know that is something that's going to be transitioning. I put it on here last because, if I'm being very honest, ACT hasn't mattered to our kids for a while. We started testing them on the SAT additionally with the class of 2018, and I will tell you that the years where you give students a practice ACT, an SAT, a practice SAT, and an SAT, by the end they're just like, you jokers, leave me alone. Like, they don't want to test that anymore. So while this data is relevant because it's something that speaks to a board goal, we have not had a concentrated effort around it at ACT for a couple of years because the state is measuring us by SAT. We did get some adjusted data from ACT, which adjusted our 2019 average score up to 22 from 21.7. So what you're seeing there is back to 2012, what the average score was. One of my instructional coaches reminded me today that 2017 was the last year that we gave students a full year of CAP class. It's a semester course now, so we're talking about a point at which we went from preparing our most struggling students for a full year to now at max them having that semester of preparation on top of whatever else they might do, right? Maybe Huntington Learning, Sylvan, maybe RB Prep that we offer. And then we always tell a growth story. So we're looking at ACT expects a growth of 5 points a year. That's what they consider to be standard in terms of their benchmarking. So with that bump to 22, we are still meeting what is expected growth for our students. Which I think, especially with 2 years of not putting a lot of effort behind ACT and our students knowing that ACT is not the measurement by which we are measured, is a big deal. We actually checked with Beth Augustine to say, like, aren't kids still taking the ACT though, right? Like, aren't they still doing both? And from a student services perspective, she's saying really no. They're really, when we transitioned to the SAT, they really transitioned with it. And we're not seeing students that are wanting to go out and take the ACT as much.
So I think when we do our retreat, we need to get some information from our families because the colleges were still asking for ACT and grant money was still attached to ACT scores. And if you had a recent student going into college, money came at 28 and 30. Anything higher.
I think a lot of that's changed. I think a lot of schools now are taking either SAT, actually more have shifted to the SAT. We also have some schools now that are doing super scoring with ACT.
I think that was ACT's way of trying to get skin back in the game.
Yeah, a lot of things have shifted in the last 3 to 4 years.
Well, I think that's something as a board we need to, when we do our retreat, probably spend some time with the community to find out and then maybe ask Beth, what are colleges asking for?
Yeah, I would recommend we bring Beth in before
Yeah.
the retreat so the board's educated on what the trends are. Maybe when Kylie comes back in December, Beth
I
can
can
join
bring
you.
Beth. It would be like-
See, you already.
There you go.
Bring your ACT.
She's probably walking.
Bring a
Sorry,
friend.
Beth.
You open the door.
Call a friend. That's what we're gonna do.
There you go.
If we get Dave Mannon to come, it's gonna be a
You know
real
what?
party.
I'm all for it.
All right, let's do it.
Student impact from attendance to SAT success.
They're gonna kill me
Start
tomorrow.
Oh my God.
After I'm hiding in your office.
Put that on a
Safety.
color-coded bar graph.
Yeah, Kylie, what was on the last page?
The last page was the college readiness indicators. So what you see there is the percent of students that were meeting benchmarks for composite overall, and then English, math, reading, and science. So you can take a look at, that's the percentage of our students who scored that score in parentheses at the back of that benchmark.
It's a lot of data. Kylie, great job. We always save you for the last goal report of the year because we know you enjoy reporting out on all these items. We are looking at some of the district goals throughout the year. Obviously, the board's retreats in February. So we'll continue to take your recommendations. Obviously, I think you heard about the growth. And I think what you're showing here on the EPAS growth is what the board wants to see, something similar with SAT.
Sure, yep.
Right, I think Deanna asked a great question of like, well, if we can see where they came in on the entrance exam as a freshman and how
Yes.
they did as a junior,
Yep.
if we're meeting what SAT says we should be doing or exceeding
Absolutely.
that, that's where we should be trying to get 100%.
Yes, and considering, I think we have to make a consideration for, what we do with students when we have them for 3 years, knowing that we do get a lot of transfers in. And we know anybody that works in any school, you know that you have control only over what happens in your building, right? Only over what you're able to do with students when they're in front of you. Do you want me to go into
Yeah, you had
classes?
we had a last, this was a request by some of the board members, just when we went over course guide. I think I only received one question on it, so if you could just touch on what the information is and answer the one question,
Yep.
the board can kind of go through the rest of this on their own.
So what you see in front of you is a 5-year summary of what courses did not have enough students in them to run per board policy 6:31 minimum course enrollment. So these are courses that did not meet the 20 threshold for us to bring them to the board for board approval. It's important to note that in wellness, we don't use that 20 as a threshold, we use a 40 because wellness classes are higher. So you're gonna be able to see by department what courses students signed up for but were not necessarily able to run. I will say this, over the past 5 years, there have been courses that our teaching staff, our counseling staff know are not gonna run, right? Historically, I use teaching internship as an example at my leadership council meeting today. So a student that sat in front of a counselor in 2017 and said, I wanna take teaching internship, I would venture to say I'm 95% certain that counselor would know the history of RB enough to know that, say to that student, that class isn't gonna run. And I think that speaks to one of the questions that one of the board members asked in terms of, there are kids that may have wanted some of these courses that don't appear on this document because there has been a tradition of certain classes not running. With course requests this year, especially since we started doing them around the time that this question was asked and we were asked for this data, Beth told her team, if any student says they want anything on the books, write it down so that we have a more true picture really for this year of what students are asking for in terms of what they want to take and what may or may not be able to have those numbers to run. Those numbers won't be done until we finish all of our course requests, which will be not until January, but I just wanted to let you know that that's a measure that we took to really make sure we're truly capturing this picture. I will say in terms of the question, which might I recommend taking off? That has never been a me conversation. It's always been a team discussion with our leadership council, our building administration, our instructional coaches. And I actually do come to the board in second semester to present it's curriculum council, where I present, these are the courses that our teachers, our instructional coaches, our leadership team are proposing that we add, as well as some that we're proposing that we take away. So that's a discussion that we need to have as a leadership team to talk about which of these courses should be ones that sort of come off the books, so that we can then bring those options to the board and get your blessing. It's not ever something that I would just go through and say, you know what, world percussion, I'm taking it out, because the curriculum guide is a document that exists at the behest of the board because it structures our curriculum. So any of these courses that we would consider taking off the books, we would formally propose to the Board of Education with a rationale of why we would want to see those come off.
I think the concern from the board was, are kids being led to believe there's all these options when there's not?
Right, and I think it's a chicken and egg type situation, right? So I think it's, parents, students look at the curriculum guide and think they have these options that are not options. I'm pleased to hear the direction being pushed out to the counselors about what is available, and I think maybe there's a further step of, do we want our teachers to advocate for certain classes with students who might be interested in world percussion or whatever example you use? Because I think there's some of this is, you may not know, you look at your curriculum guide as an 8th grader, maybe as a freshman, do you look at it again when you're a sophomore or a junior?
Right.
Or you've been told by your counselor for 2 years, it's never gonna run.
Right.
Right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
how do we kind of break that pattern and get accurate numbers? Do we really have a group that's interested in world percussion? And in which case, then we need to support it, right?
Yeah.
And if we're in the bubble, if we're in that 17, 18 range with your February report, we should be able to acknowledge that. Because when we're saying, 2 people,
Right.
we're never going to have that discussion here.
Right,
So
and 4 out of 5 years is canceled.
right, so the consensus from anybody who walks through the building is we're never going to offer it. It's all kind of, it's we're not being transparent about it. So I think we need to be transparent, and I think we need to track these and understand what's really available and where's their interest. So it's not just at the counselor level, I'm guessing.
Yes.
It's going to be at the teacher level as
Yes.
well. I've
And
got
our
a kid who
teachers
really.
we have teachers that put presentations together for their specific classes, right? So the woman in our history department who teaches AP European history is able to do some outreach to students because she has a presentation already that's packaged to talk about what is AP, what is AP US history or AP European history. For example, James Baum takes the rock band to lunch and they perform at lunch, and that's exposure for them, right? You know, he get on the microphone and say, if you want to join rock band, like this is the kind of stuff that you're going to be doing. So, and we also offer opportunities for, especially our fine arts teachers, our world language teachers, our applied arts teachers, to visit with the middle schools, to let them know these are the kind of things that we do in Spanish. This is what that looks like if you take a German course, and here are the benefits that you can have. So our teachers do a nice job of really letting people know what courses are out there and recruit, so to speak, for certain courses. But to your point, absolutely, I completely understand what you're saying in terms of, we want to tell families that you can take these courses, and we want them to be able to kind of do that in good faith. Right?
And I'm sure some teachers are going to be better advocates than others,
Sure.
right? So, you know, this needs to be a uniform approach in terms of here's what's in the curriculum guide. Take advantage of what's out there. And then if we're sitting here in February saying this has not ever reached critical mass for 6 years, that's a different discussion.
Well, especially, I mean, the clear trend that I see is that it's between applied arts and fine arts.
Yes.
And as somebody in the field, it pains me to
Yeah.
see that. And so, you know, I know of one high school on the north side where they have, I think every 2 years, they have something called Weekend for the Arts.
Oh, okay.
And it's a big cultural thing. I mean, it's, you know, this isn't going to change overnight either, but I'll be very interested to hear from the community about, what do you think about the fact that the arts are, you know, they're behind, it seems like, other things.
When we had a conversation today along that line, you know, one of the classes that jumps out at us is, when we look at this, are any of the AP classes, right? Those are the ones that really jump out at us of not being able to offer students. And, you know, we talked with our instructional coach for fine arts, Aubrey Prince, talking about music theory, AP music theory, and she said, you know, you're never going to go to a school that is going to have 25 kids in 1 year that want to take AP music theory.
Right.
It's a very specialized class, right? And those students who take AP music theory are doing so because they see themselves in a future in music. She talked about when she was in high school, she was in an AP music theory class with 3 kids. So maybe even looking at how we can strategically put some offerings together that capitalize on that, like what you were saying, on an every other year basis or something of that nature, if we really want to value those experiences for kids.
Kylie, we gotta get this moving with the agenda, because I have the auditor that needs to present the audit. But
Is he burning a hole in the back of my head with his eyes?
one thing,
Trust me, this is a lot more fun.
one thing I would say to you,
Wow, that's
That was rough. He was rough on you. It was rough on you.
I think that this may lend itself to something that Laura has brought up in the past, like seeing these classes. Is that something the board needs to look at going forward with the specific, the way we have specific graduation requirements, and do we need to open those more to electives, a different, you know, is that something that needs to be reviewed from the board and from feedback from the community, that, you know, the students that want to take more courses aligned with AP and academics can, and the kids that want to take more applied arts and arts, right? I mean, that's always been your push, right, of the graduation requirements.
Also doing
We need a
some-
core, and then we need to have options. We need to
talked
have
about
that
doing some
core, like
online
minimum
learning. Is
fit
there a way
and
to
options.
have like some
Yes.
independent study class where
We talked about that
he's
today,
doing
too.
the AP music
Yes.
theory, he's doing the world percussion, and, you know, and rock band, you know, they can help, you know, it'll fill up that, but you could have those kids at one, you take 3 different classes and put them into one, and all of a sudden you have 20 kids, and then we justify spending the money for an instructor.
Sure.
Because it's really, at the end of the day, we're talking about, you know,
We're talking
spending the
about
money for an
FTE.
instructor.
Yes.
Right, so if we can fill 20 with 3 and 4 independent, or 3 independent studies, does that work? And I don't know what that looks like.
Right, because there's the star that says teacher cannot be secured for course, right? So there are some things that kids want to do
We
that
couldn't
we
secure a
just
teacher.
don't have the manpower.
Right, and no one, in that particular
No
case,
one-
we are certainly not alone. That's all across Illinois.
Right.
With that shortage.
But I mean, if you
yes,
have a
you're right.
shortage of family and consumer science teachers, and RB as a single school district is only offering 3 sections, and someone down the road is offering 5 sections because either their enrollment's bigger or their class minimum is smaller, that teacher that is available is gonna take the full-time job over the part-time.
Sure,
Right.
sure, but that's why I'm saying perhaps some sort of online option
Sure.
would be of value to.
I can certainly look into that.
Kylie, great job as always.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions before we ask, Kylie?
Before you politely ask me to get out of the
Get out.
room and stop talking.
Or you
I
can stay,
read
I thought,
between
are
those
you
lines.
staying for the auditor report? No.
And I think I'm not going to.
Okay, all right, thank you, Kylie.
Why, you haven't been here since
I think I'm
7
gonna
a.m.?
bow out gracefully.
Oh, you're missing the fun.
Thank you very much.